Okay, folks, ready for a deep dive? Buckle up, because today we're heading to England.
Sounds fun.
It is, but we're not talking about like the touristy stuff, Big Ben or double-decker buses or anything like that.
Right.
We're going a little deeper. We're looking at some observations from someone who visits England a lot.
Okay.
And they've noticed some changes, let's say, in England's social fabric.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're talking about like those underlying things that make up a society.
The bedrock. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So things like how people interact with each other, the general vibe, even like levels of trust in society.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and this visitor, they brought up some points that are a little unsettling.
Oh,
Yeah, England has this image, right, of being polite and kind of cohesive, but the visitor is seeing some cracks in that facade.
I see. So we're diving into the underbelly of English society today.
Yeah, precisely. So let's start with something that really jumped out at me when I was looking at this visitor's account. They talked about England becoming a low-trust society.
Low trust.
Yeah, and when I think about that, it's like imagining a place where people are less likely to lend a hand or like watch out for each other.
I guess you.
Like, if you dropped your wallet, would someone return it or would they just keep walking?
Right. Or would you be, constantly looking over your shoulder kind of thing?
Exactly. Like
Mm.
there's this underlying suspicion. So I'm curious, from your perspective as an expert, what are your thoughts on this whole idea of societal trust? Like,
No.
how important is it really?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's like the bedrock of a society.
Right.
I mean, think about it. When people trust each other, it just makes everything smoother, Like
Yeah,
communities can actually function, People help each other out.
makes sense.
Economies can run more efficiently because there's less friction. You don't have to constantly be double checking everything.
Right.
Right.
And studies have actually shown that people in high trust societies tend to be happier and healthier overall.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And our visitor here, they contrasted England with Scandinavian countries.
Oh, right. Yeah, they brought up Scandinavia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those are often held up as like the gold standard of high trust societies.
Right.
And our visitor even went so far as to suggest that maybe part of this shift in England has to do with immigration.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're saying that perhaps an influx of people from what they perceive as, lower trust cultures is contributing to this change.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
Yeah.
And we have to be
Yeah.
careful here because
Of course, yeah.
attributing something as complex as societal trust to just one factor, like immigration, is a bit of an oversimplification.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's got to be more to it than that, right?
Right.
So how do we even begin to measure something like societal trust? Like what are the factors at play here?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It is.
And the truth is there's no single answer. It's a whole bunch of things all tangled up together.
Hmm.
I mean, you've got things like economic inequality, right?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
If people are struggling to make ends meet, they're less likely to trust those around them.
Right. They're worried about their own survival.
Exactly. Then you've got political events, big shifts in the political landscape can erode trust in institutions.
Oh, for sure.
And even something like generational differences can play a role.
How so?
Well, different generations might have different experiences and values, which can influence how they view trust.
That's really interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not about blaming any one group or factor, but understanding how all these things work together.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. And it's important to remember that our visitor, they're not just bashing England.
Right.
They clearly care about the country and are concerned about these changes.
Of course.
And another thing they brought up was that classic English politeness, or maybe the lack thereof these days.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they shared some experiences where they felt like customer service just wasn't as warm or as courteous as it used to be. Like they went into shops and just didn't encounter that friendly, helpful attitude they expected.
Yeah. I mean, haven't we all had those experiences where you go somewhere and you're like, wow, this person clearly doesn't want to be here?
Totally.
Yeah.
But do you think that's a sign of a bigger cultural shift or just, bad luck with a few grumpy employees?
That's a great question, and it's hard to say for sure. But what's interesting is that we've actually seen reports of declining customer service in a bunch of different countries.
Really?
Yeah, so it might not be just an England thing.
Huh. So what could be causing that globally then?
Well, I mean, you've got the rise of automation, right?
Oh, right, yeah. More self-checkout kiosks, fewer actual humans to interact with.
Exactly. And then you've got companies trying to cut costs, so maybe they're not investing as much in training their staff.
Makes sense.
And then there's the whole gig economy
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
where people are working multiple jobs. Maybe they're not as invested in any one particular role.
Yeah, that could definitely have an impact.
It could. And our visitor also mentioned something else that's kind of related to this.
And what's that?
They said they encountered a lot of service workers who were speaking broken English.
Oh, right. They did mention that.
And that can lead to frustration on both sides if you're struggling to understand each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it raises some bigger questions about integrating diverse populations and the role of language in creating a cohesive society.
That's a great point.
If communication is a barrier, even in simple interactions, it can create this sense of disconnect.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so are you ready for a topic that's a little bit heavier?
Oh, hit me.
All right, so our visitor also observed a significant increase in obesity and related health issues in England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, particularly things that impact mobility.
Oh, like people having trouble walking and stuff.
Exactly. They described seeing people visibly struggling to get around, and that's, a pretty stark image.
It is, yeah. It's definitely something that makes you stop and think.
Right. And unfortunately, this observation ties into a much larger issue.
What do you mean?
Well, we're seeing a rise in obesity and related diseases all over the world.
Oh, right. It's not just an England thing.
Exactly. It's a global public health crisis, and there are a lot of factors contributing to it.
Like what?
Well, you've got the proliferation of processed foods, right?
Oh, yeah?
Everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And then people are living more sedentary lifestyles.
Sitting at desks all day.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you often have unequal access to health care and healthy food options.
Right. So it's like a whole system that's kind of working against people.
In a way, yeah. It's a complex problem and it requires a complex solution.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's definitely something that's worth reflecting on. Like, what are we seeing in our own communities?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit to something a little bit more controversial.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So our visitor expressed concern about what they called trash culture taking over.
Trash culture.
Yeah, and they're talking about things like reality TV, celebrity worship, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And their feeling is that it's contributing to a general dumbing down of society.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we unpack this observation without just dismissing it out of hand?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because this is a critique we often hear, especially from older generations,
Right.
who feel like things have gone downhill,
Like back in my day.
Exactly. They look at today's media and entertainment and they see a shift away from what they consider to be traditional highbrow culture.
So Shakespeare versus Love Island.
Precisely. But it's important to remember that culture is constantly evolving.
Of course.
What one generation sees as trash might be another generation's primary form of entertainment and social connection.
Yeah, it's all relative, right?
Exactly. And media studies, scholars have spent a lot of time looking at this phenomenon.
Really?
Yeah, they're interested in understanding how cultural values and preferences change over time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So instead of just labeling something as good or bad,
Yeah.
we should try to understand what's driving these shifts.
Exactly.
Okay, so where does the media itself fit into all of this? Like, how much influence does it have on shaping these trends?
Well, the media's role is undeniable.
Right.
It both reflects and shapes societal values.
Okay.
And in today's world where we're bombarded with information and entertainment from all directions,
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
it's more important than ever to be a discerning consumer of media.
To think critically about what we're watching and reading.
Exactly. Okay, so are you ready to add another layer to this whole discussion?
Always lay it on me.
All right, so our visitor brought up something that's very specific to England, its class system.
Oh, right. They talked about that.
Yeah. And their belief is that this deeply ingrained class system might actually be contributing to some of the other issues we've been talking about.
Like the erosion of trust or the decline in politeness.
Exactly. They see it as this underlying force that creates divisions in society and fosters a sense of hopelessness.
That's interesting. Now, for those of us who aren't as familiar with the British class system, can you give us a little background?
Sure. So the British class system has a long and complex history.
Yeah, it goes way back.
It does. Traditionally, it divided society into different layers based on things like birth, wealth, and occupation.
Okay, so you were kind of born into your class.
In a way, yeah. And your class would determine your access to education, social circles, even job opportunities.
Wow. So it really permeated every aspect of life.
It did. And while the system has evolved over time, its legacy still lingers.
I see.
And what our visitor is suggesting is that maybe this ingrained sense of hierarchy is making it harder to address some of these other societal challenges.
That's fascinating. And it makes you think about, do we have similar systems in our own communities?
Exactly.
Maybe not based on birth or aristocracy or whatever, but, hierarchies exist everywhere.
They do.
Yeah.
Whether it's based on socioeconomic status, race, religion, there's always some kind of pecking order.
Right. And those hierarchies can definitely shape our interactions and our opportunities.
Absolutely. So it's something to think about, how do these systems contribute to the overall fabric of a society?
That's a great point.
Are they creating barriers or fostering equality?
Big questions.
Big questions indeed.
So we've covered a lot of ground here looking at this visitor's observations about England.
We have.
And it seems like there's some real challenges that the country is facing,
It does seem that way.
from declining trust to health issues to cultural shifts. It's a lot.
It is. And it makes you wonder, is this just an England thing, or are we seeing similar trends happening all over the world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Are we all headed towards a low-trust, trash culture future?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball,
Fair enough.
but it's definitely something worth pondering.
It is. So deep divers, as you go about your day, take a look around.
What do you see happening in your own community?
Are you noticing any of these trends playing out in your corner of the world?
The erosion of trust,
The changing face of politeness.
the impact of social hierarchies.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. But hey, that's what deep dives are for.
Exactly.
Okay.
So until next time, happy diving.